October 1957. Harlingen, Texas. A cotton farm 12 miles northwest of town, in the lower Rio Grande Valley, where the fields run flat to every horizon, and the sky in harvest season is the color of pale brass. The loan officer arrives on a Tuesday, and he has brought a second man with him. His name was Raymond Fitch. He worked for the Rio Grande Savings Association, and he drove a two-tone Chevrolet that he parked at the edge of the property line rather than in the yard. He understood the difference between a man's land and the road beside it, and he had decided today the road was close enough. He wore a brown suit. He had a briefcase. He came across the dry grass toward the porch without hurrying, because Raymond Fitch was not a man who hurried. The second man stayed by the car and did not look at the house. Here is the story. The farm had been Nora Calhoun's for 9 years. It had been the Calhoun family's for 23 years before that, which meant that Nora had grown up in its kitchen, had learned to read at the table that was still in its kitchen, had married James Calhoun in the front room on a Saturday in June of 1944, and watched him drive away to the Pacific 3 months later, and worked the fields beside his father until James came home in 1946 with a shrapnel scar along his left forearm and a quietness about him that the valley sun slowly burned off over the years that followed. James's father died in 1948. James took the farm. He ran it well. He kept the equipment, patched the irrigation lines himself when they cracked in the August heat, knew his soil the way a man knows his own handwriting. He and Nora had a daughter named Ruth, born in 1947, and a son named Carl, born in 1950. James Calhoun was called back up in June of 1950. Korea, 2nd Infantry Division. He was killed at the Battle of the Naktong River on September 2, 1950. He was 31 years old. The telegram arrived on a Thursday morning while Nora was hanging the week's washing on the line behind the house, and the cotton was coming in, and Ruth was 3 years old, and Carl was 3 months old. She hired 2 field workers from the county and paid them on time, every week, without exception. She learned the irrigation system the way James knew it, by breaking it and fixing it herself. She planted on James's schedule and sold on James's schedule, and when the cotton prices dropped in 1952, she held half the crop in the barn for 6 weeks and sold it after the price recovered, which was a thing James had done once and she had watched and remembered. She paid the farm note at $185 a month. She missed no payments in 7 years. Have you ever known someone who kept a thing going that had no right to keep going, on nothing but will and work, and the refusal to let the hard year be the last year? Some of you were raised on land like this. Some of you know exactly what a cotton field smells like in October. That particular mix of dry dust and open boll, and something faintly sweet underneath it all. In the summer of 1957, a development company out of Corpus Christi began buying land in the lower Rio Grande Valley for a planned irrigation district expansion. They bought 4 parcels adjacent to the Calhoun farm between May and August. In September, a representative visited the Rio Grande Savings Association and had a conversation with Raymond Fitch about the Calhoun note. The terms of that conversation were not recorded. What followed from it was. Raymond Fitch requested an internal audit of the Calhoun account in late September. The audit surfaced a discrepancy in how 2 partial payments from 1952 had been applied to principal versus interest. The discrepancy was $340. Raymond Fitch sent a certified letter notifying Nora Calhoun that the $340 had been generating interest at the rate specified in the original note for 5 years, and that the total now owed was $560, due within 30 days, or the bank would have cause to review the entire standing of the note. Nora Calhoun had $210 in her account. The cotton harvest was 3 weeks from completion. She wrote back and explained the timing. She offered to pay the $560 from harvest proceeds as soon as the gin cleared payment, which would be 35 days. Raymond Fitch replied that 35 days was outside the 30-day window specified in his letter. He was sorry for the inconvenience. This is what his letter said. He was sorry for the inconvenience. She drove to the bank. Raymond Fitch was courteous. He offered her a chair. He had the file open on his desk before she sat down, which told her the conversation had been prepared rather than begun. He explained the compounding mechanism that had turned $340 into $560. It was in the note on page 3, in a paragraph about identified variances. He said the bank's hands were tied. He said the development company had expressed an interest in the parcel should the note come into distress. Raymond Fitch was telling her, in the language of a man who believed in appearances, that the outcome had already been arranged. She looked at him across his desk. She was 38 years old. She had run that farm alone for 7 years. She had 2 children, one of them in middle school and one of them in the 2nd grade. James Calhoun's name was on the wall of the 2nd Infantry Division Memorial. She had a gold star flag in the window of the farmhouse that had been there since September of 1950. Raymond Fitch said the bank had an obligation to its other depositors to ensure the integrity of its loan portfolio. She said nothing. She drove home. The field hands, both of them, were working the east section when she came back. A neighbor woman who had watched the children while Nora drove to town was still in the kitchen. The farm looked exactly the way a farm looks when it has no idea what is happening to it. Nobody in that yard knew. Nobody moved. You know how a room goes quiet like that, when everything around a person is going on as usual, and the person at the center of it is carrying something that hasn't reached anyone else yet. She sat in the truck in the yard for a while, without getting out. Where are you watching from? Drop your state in the comments. I want to see how far this story reaches. Across the road, at the shoulder of the county highway that ran along the farm's northern edge, a black pickup had been parked since mid-morning. The man sitting on its tailgate had come down from San Antonio the day before on his way to a location shoot near the coast, a day ahead of schedule, and had taken the farm road through the valley because he had not been through the Rio Grande Valley in years, and he remembered what the cotton looked like in October. He watched Nora Calhoun's truck come up the county road. He watched it turn into the yard. He watched it sit 4 minutes without the door opening. A man sits on a tailgate long enough, watching a yard, and he can tell the difference between a woman who is tired and a woman who has just been told something that changed the shape of the next year. He folded the paper sack. He put his hat on. He drove across the road. He had not come to get involved. He had come to look at the cotton. He parked at the edge of the yard, the way a person parks when they are not certain of their welcome, and he walked to the truck. Nora had gotten out by then. She was standing beside the driver's door with her arms folded, looking at the east section where the field hands were still working. He took his hat off. He asked if she was all right. She said she was fine. He said, "You don't look fine. You look like a woman who just sat in her truck for 4 minutes before she got out, and women who sit in their trucks for 4 minutes before they get out are generally not fine." She told him. Not everything. The short version, the way people tell things when they do not want sympathy, just facts. The $560. The 30 days, the development company's name, which she did not need to explain, because the company had been buying land in the valley all summer, and everyone knew it. She told him the harvest was 3 weeks out, and the gin cleared in 35 days, and that was the distance between where she stood and where she needed to be. He listened. He did not ask questions that were not necessary. He looked at the east section, where the cotton was coming in. Then, he said, "I'd like to go to the bank with you. If you'll have me. I have some thoughts about that 30-day window." She looked at him. He said, "And if thoughts aren't enough, I have a checkbook." They drove to the Rio Grande Savings Association the following morning. Raymond Fitch was at his desk. He looked up when they came in, and his expression did the thing that expressions do when a room changes without warning. It held its shape for a moment longer than it should have. And then it changed. The man sat down across the desk from Raymond Fitch, and he did not put his hat on the desk. He set it on his knee. He looked at Raymond Fitch the way you look at a man when you have already decided what you are going to say, and you are giving him one opportunity to make it unnecessary. He said, "Raymond, I'm going to need you to extend that window to 45 days. Raymond Fitch said the terms of the note did not allow for, he said. I wasn't asking about the note. His voice was level. One sentence. Then he waited. Raymond Fitch looked at the file. Raymond Fitch looked at the man. Raymond Fitch did the particular mathematics that men like Raymond Fitch do when the situation has shifted and they need to find a way to call the shift something other than what it is. He said he believed a 45-day extension could be accommodated given the circumstances. Nora Calhoun made the $560 payment in full on the 43rd day from the cotton harvest proceeds. She went to Raymond Fitch's window herself because she wanted Raymond Fitch to put the received stamp on the receipt with his own hand, and he did. And she took the receipt home and put it in the strongbox under the bed where she kept the farm's documents and James's discharge papers, and the letter from his commanding officer that had come in November of 1950, the one she had read 11 times in the first year and then put away. But that is not what the man with the checkbook did before they left the bank. Outside, on the sidewalk, he stopped. He said, "I want to talk to you about the note itself." She said the note was fine. She said she would have the payment in 43 days and it would never be an issue again. He said, "The note will be fine, but you have $68,000 outstanding on a piece of land that a development company has already tried to take from you once, and Raymond Fitch knows their name." He paused. "I'd like to co-sign the renewal when it comes up in February. Put a second name on it. It makes the land harder to maneuver around." She said she could not ask him to do that. He said, "You didn't ask. I offered. There's a difference, and I'd like you to know which one this is." In February of 1958, when the note came up for its annual review, the renewal document that Raymond Fitch prepared for Nora Calhoun's signature had 2 signature lines on it, because she had requested a co-signer be added to the account. And the name on the second line was the name that it was, and Raymond Fitch signed as the witnessing officer without a word, and the development company's representative never came back to the Rio Grande Savings Association. And that was the end of that. Nora Calhoun farmed that land for 21 more years. She paid the note off completely in 1969, 12 years ahead of the original schedule, because she ran a tight operation and knew her soil and never wasted a season. Ruth went to Texas A&M and came back to the Valley and married a man who understood farming. Carl went to A&M 4 years later and came back and bought an adjacent parcel in 1974. By 1978, when Nora handed the farm to Ruth and Carl together, not to one, to both, because she had raised them to share the hard things, the Calhoun land had grown from 1 parcel to 3. 240 acres where there had been 80. 3 generations of the family's name on deeds in the Cameron County Courthouse. Think about what a co-signature in February of 1958 became Nora farmed those 80 acres from 1957 through 1978, 21 more years after Raymond Fitch arrived in his brown suit. Ruth and Carl have farmed it since. That is 67 years of Calhoun cotton from the lower Rio Grande Valley, rooted in land that a development company's money and a loan officer's arrangements nearly pulled out from under a woman who had raised 2 children alone since a telegram arrived on a Thursday morning in 1950. The note on that farm in October 1957 was $68,000 and change. One name added to a renewal document in February was the difference between a family keeping their land and a development company buying it for a price that would never have felt like enough. In the main room of the farmhouse, Ruth lives there now. She has lived there since 1981. When Nora moved to Harlingen to be nearer the grandchildren, there is a wooden box on the shelf above the fireplace. The box is cedar. James Calhoun built it from scraps in the winter of 1947. Inside it is the farm's deed as it was renewed in February of 1958, folded along its original crease, and below it, still rubber-banded to the deed with a band that has been replaced twice, because rubber does not last, but documents do, is a copy of the co-signer line. 2 names. Nora's in her careful, even hand. The second name below hers. The afternoon light comes through the west-facing window in the late hours of the day and falls across the shelf in the cedar box and holds there for a while before it goes. The cotton fields Ruth and Carl farm together run right to the property line, the same as they always have, flat to every horizon. If you find yourself in the lower Rio Grande Valley in October, take the county road northwest out of Harlingen 12 miles. You'll see the cotton first. Then you'll see the house behind it, the white one with the porch. The same porch Raymond Fitch walked across in October of 1957 in his brown suit. The cedar box is on the shelf to the right of the fireplace. The names are still in it. Some of you know someone who put their name on something for a person who needed it and never mentioned it again. A lease, a note. A line on a piece of paper that meant a family kept what was theirs. This story belongs to them, too. John Wayne never told anyone. Not Ruth. Not Carl. Not the men on the location shoot he rejoined 2 days later. There is no entry in any correspondence that has been made public. There is no account of it in any interview. Not in the long ones. Not in the late ones when men sometimes say more than they meant to. What is known is what Nora told Ruth the winter before she died, sitting in the same kitchen where Nora had learned to read, at the same table, and what Ruth wrote down that evening in the back of the household ledger she kept, because she understood that some things needed to be written before they were lost. A man sat on a truck tailgate and watched a yard. He saw a door stay closed 4 minutes longer than it should. He drove across a road. He took his hat off. He listened. He did not offer sympathy. He offered something useful instead. And he offered it the way a man offers something when he has thought it through and is certain of it, not as a favor, but as a fact. Some things last because someone decided they should. That is most of how it ever got out at all. If this story meant something to you, subscribe. There is another one like it every week. And unfortunately, they don't make men like John Wayne anymore.